I still remember that day like it's carved into my bones. I was 12, sitting on the worn-out couch in our tiny living room, kicking at the loose thread on my sneaker while Mom whispered on the phone in the kitchen. The house smelled like burnt coffee and the cheap candles she always bought at the dollar store to make it feel homey. But even then, I knew something was off. Her voice was shaky, urgent. Every few seconds, she'd glance over at me with these hollow eyes, like she couldn't look at me for more than a second without crumbling. I didn't understand what was happening until that knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps that made my heart jump. Mom froze. She wiped her hands on her jeans, took a deep breath, and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Stay here, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "Everything's gonna be fine." It wasn't. 2 strangers walked in, a man in a gray suit with slicked back hair and a woman with a clipboard clutched to her chest. They smelled like perfume and cigarettes. I remember thinking they didn't belong there, in our little house with peeling wallpaper and broken blinds. They talked to Mom in low voices while I sat frozen, trying to piece together what was happening. My name kept coming up. So did words I didn't understand: agreement, payment, better future. When the woman crouched in front of me and said, "Ethan, you're coming with us for a little while," my stomach knotted so hard it hurt. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to tell them no, to tell them I wasn't going anywhere. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just nodded, biting her lips so hard it bled. "Mom?" My voice cracked. "What's going on? Where are we going?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And then the man grabbed my small duffel bag, the one I used for sleepovers, and said, "It's time." I screamed. I kicked. I begged her not to let them take me. I remember clinging to her waist, my face pressed against her shirt that smelled like laundry soap and tears. She peeled my arms away, one by one, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "This is for the best. You'll understand someday." But I didn't. Not then. Not for years. The drive away from my neighborhood was a blur. I pressed my forehead against the cold window of the car, watching the only world I'd ever known shrink behind me. The cracked sidewalks where I rode my bike, the corner store where Mom bought me slushies on hot days, the neighbors who always waved, all of it disappeared until there was nothing but highway and the strangers' quiet voices in the front seat. I didn't cry after that. I just sat there, numb, staring at my hands in my lap. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking, but I couldn't feel anything. It was like my body had shut down to protect me from the truth. My mom had given me away. For money. I kept replaying it in my head. The way she couldn't look at me. The way she said, "This is for the best." I wanted to hate her right then. I wanted to scream that I never wanted to see her again. But under all the anger, there was this crushing sadness. This question I couldn't shake: why wasn't I enough? Why didn't she want me? By the time we reached the big house on the other side of town, the sun had set. The woman opened my door, her fake smile plastered across her face. "This is your new home, Ethan," she said, like she was offering me a gift. The house was huge, with perfect hedges and shining windows that reflected my pale, scared face. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there while they led me inside, my duffel bag swinging at my side like dead weight. I thought about running that night. Sneaking out and finding my way back home. But even at 12, I knew home wasn't mine anymore. Mom had made sure of that. And as I lay in a bed that didn't smell like us, in a room that felt too clean, too cold, I pressed my face into the pillow and finally let the tears come. Quiet, angry sobs that no one could hear. That was the night my world shattered. The night I stopped believing in the kind of love that stays, no matter what. The first morning in that house was the strangest of my life. I woke up to sunlight streaming through spotless windows, not the faded curtains that barely covered my room back home. The sheets were soft, the air smelled like fresh linen and something sweet, maybe pancakes. For a second, my sleepy brain thought I was still dreaming, that none of it had happened, that Mom was just in the kitchen making breakfast like always. But when I walked downstairs, the reality hit me all over again. There she wasn't. Instead, there was a woman, the same one with the clipboard, standing by a shiny marble counter, smiling like we were old friends. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, her voice syrupy but careful, like she was trying not to scare me. "Did you sleep okay?" I didn't answer. I just nodded and sat at the edge of a chair, my hands stuffed in the pocket of my hoodie. Everything in that house was too big, too clean. The walls were white, the furniture perfect, the air quiet in a way that made my ears ring. I hated it. They tried to make me comfortable. The man, his name was Richard, told me this was a new chapter, and that they were going to give me everything I'd ever need. He showed me the room they had set up for me, a big bed, a desk, even a brand new game console sitting next to a flat-screen TV. It was everything a kid my age would have killed for. But to me, it felt like a bribe. Like they were trying to buy my silence, buy my cooperation. I missed the squeak of my old bed frame, the way the floor creaked outside my room when Mom checked on me at night, even the sound of the neighbor's dog barking at every car that passed. Here, everything was too quiet. Too controlled. At school, it wasn't any easier. They enrolled me in a fancy private school where kids wore uniforms and carried tablets instead of notebooks. I didn't fit in. I didn't want to. I sat alone at lunch, ignored the whispers, ignored the stares. The teachers smiled at me with pity, like they knew some version of my story but didn't know what to say. And at night, when the lights were off and the house was still, that's when it hit the hardest. That hollow, aching feeling in my chest that nothing could fill. I thought about Mom constantly. Sometimes I was angry, furious even, imagining her counting the money she got for me. Other times, I just felt this deep, aching sadness that made it hard to breathe. No matter how hard I tried to hate her, I couldn't stop missing her. Richard and his wife, Claire, weren't cruel. They didn't yell or hit or starve me. But they didn't love me either. Not the way I needed. They talked to me like I was a project they'd taken on. They asked about my grades, about what sports I wanted to try, about whether I liked the clothes they bought. But they never asked about me. They never asked what I was feeling, or if I was scared, or if I just wanted someone to sit with me in the dark when the memories got too heavy. I spent hours in that room, staring at the ceiling, wishing for something, anything, that felt real. The new clothes, the toys, the expensive food, none of it mattered. It wasn't home. It wasn't love. It was a cage with prettier walls. Sometimes, when no one was around, I'd whisper to myself, "She's coming back. She didn't mean it. She'll come for me." It was the only way I could sleep some nights, holding on to the lie that this was temporary, that any day now I'd hear her voice at the door, crying, telling me she made a mistake and that we could go home. Weeks turned into months, and that hope started to fade. The calls never came. The letters never came. Just silence. And every day that silence grew louder, pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake. If you're listening to this, if you've ever felt abandoned or invisible, maybe you understand what that does to you. It changes you. It hardens you in ways you don't even see until years later. That house gave me everything money could buy, but it took away the one thing I needed most, to feel like I mattered to someone. And if you're here, listening to my story now, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. There are so many stories like mine, stories that remind you you're not alone in whatever you're feeling. Back then, though, I didn't have anyone. Just me, my thoughts, and the slow realization that I wasn't going home. That this house, with its spotless walls and endless quiet, was where I'd be for a very long time. It didn't happen overnight, but after a while, I stopped fighting. At first, I'd wake up every day with that tight knot in my chest, the same thought running through my mind, this isn't my home. I don't belong here. But as the weeks turned into months, that thought dulled. It didn't disappear, but it sank deep inside me, buried under the routines I forced myself to build just to keep going. School was still the hardest part. I'd sit in class surrounded by kids who talked about vacations, new phones, and ski trips while I kept my head down, pretending to take notes. I didn't talk much, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to tell them? That my mom sold me to strangers and now I lived in a house that felt like a museum? Eventually, I figured out how to blend in. I learned which kids were safe to sit near during lunch, even if we didn't talk. I learned to nod and smile just enough in class so the teachers wouldn't hover over me with their pity. I learned how to disappear in plain sight, and weirdly, that became my survival skill. At home, I kept to myself. Claire would knock on my door sometimes, asking if I wanted to watch a movie or help her bake something in the kitchen. I'd always make up an excuse, homework, feeling tired, not hungry. The truth was, I didn't trust her. I couldn't. Every time she looked at me with that careful, soft expression, all I saw was the moment my mom let go of me. I didn't want kindness. I wanted answers. I wanted the one person who had left me behind. But even with all that anger, I started building little routines to keep my mind busy. I'd sit at the desk in my room and sketch for hours, losing myself in lines and shapes that no one else would ever see. I started running laps around the backyard, pounding my feet against the grass until my lungs burned, until I was too exhausted to feel anything else. I learned to cook simple meals in the kitchen when no one was around, just so I'd have something that tasted like home, even if it wasn't the same. The house still didn't feel like mine, but I started to carve out corners of it that felt safe. The small window seat in my room where I could sit and watch the world outside. The little patch of trees at the edge of the yard where I could be alone without anyone checking on me. Those places became my refuge, the only spaces where I didn't feel like an intruder. And then there was the pretending. Pretending became second nature. At dinner, I'd answer questions about school, about whether I wanted to try a sport, about the books Claire left on my nightstand. I'd say, yeah, it's fine, or sure, maybe later, just to keep the conversation moving. I hated lying, but it was easier than explaining the truth, that no matter what they did, I still felt like the kid who got left behind. Sometimes, though, late at night when the house was quiet, I'd let myself feel it. I'd lie there in the dark, gripping the edge of my pillow, whispering apologies to the empty room. Apologies to myself for not being enough. Apologies to Mom, even though she was the one who let me go. I didn't understand it then, but I think part of me was trying to hold on to her, even if it was through pain. Survival wasn't about forgetting. It was about adapting. I learned that if I kept my head down, stayed out of trouble, and followed their rules, the days passed easier. I learned to control my face, to hide my feelings so well that even I started to believe them. People thought I was adjusting. They said things like, "You're so strong," or "You're doing so well." But inside, I felt hollow, like I was living someone else's life. Looking back now, I think that was the beginning of the person I became, quiet, cautious, always waiting for the ground to fall out from under me. That house taught me that nothing was permanent, that anyone could leave at any moment. And so I built walls around myself, high enough that no one could see over them. I didn't know it at the time, but surviving like that came with a cost. I stopped dreaming about going home. I stopped believing that Mom would show up and say she was sorry. And the scariest part? A piece of me started to believe that maybe this was all I deserved, a quiet life where I existed, but never really belonged. Still, survival is a strange thing. You don't notice it happening while you're in it. You just wake up one day and realize you've learned how to breathe in a world that once felt suffocating. You've learned how to make it look like you're okay, even when you're not. And that's what I did, day after day, year after year. I wasn't happy. I wasn't healed. But I was surviving. And back then, that was enough to keep me going. I was 16 the day the letter came. By then, I had gotten good at living a quiet life. I went to school, kept my grades decent, came home, stayed in my room, and avoided any real connection with the people who had taken me in. I wasn't the angry, broken kid I used to be, but I wasn't whole either. I was just numb. That afternoon, I walked through the front door like always, my backpack hanging from one shoulder, when Claire stopped me in the hallway. She was holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said carefully, like she didn't know if handing it over was the right thing to do. I took it from her, confused. No one ever wrote to me. Not friends, not relatives, not even teachers. I stared at the envelope. My name was written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, but I recognized it instantly. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. "Mom." I didn't open it right there. I mumbled a thanks and rushed upstairs to my room, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I tore the envelope open, the paper ripping unevenly in my grip. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the kind she used to keep in the kitchen drawer next to the phone. The handwriting was messy, like she'd written it fast, but the words burned into me. "Ethan. I don't know where to start. I don't know if you hate me, and you have every reason to. But I need you to know I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I was scared, I was desperate, and I made a mistake I can never undo. I'm clean now. I'm working. I have my own place. And I want to see you. Just once. Please. If you can find it in your heart to meet me, I'll be waiting. Love. Mom." I must have read that letter 10 times in a row. My hands were sweating, my throat felt tight, and my chest was this mess of emotions I couldn't untangle. anger, hope, confusion, fear. For years, I'd told myself I didn't care anymore. That I'd stopped waiting for her to show up, stopped dreaming about going home. But the moment I saw her handwriting, the moment I read her words, all of that came rushing back. I sat there for hours, staring at that piece of paper. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to throw it in the trash and pretend it had never arrived. After everything she'd done, after the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough, how dare she think she could just write to me and fix it? But another part of me, the part that still ached every time I thought about her, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that maybe she was telling the truth. That maybe she had changed. The days that followed were torture. I carried that letter everywhere, folded and unfolded so many times the edges started to tear. At school, during class, I'd slip it out of my pocket and stare at her words until my eyes blurred. At night, I'd lay in bed and imagine what it would be like to see her again. Would she hug me? Would she look the same? Would I even recognize her? Richard and Claire noticed something was off. Claire tried to talk to me about it one night at dinner, but I brushed her off. How could I explain something like that to her? How could I tell her that the woman who had broken me was trying to put herself back into my life? By the end of the week, I knew I had to make a decision. I could ignore the letter and keep living the life I'd built, a life where I didn't have to face her or the pain she'd left behind. Or I could take the risk, open the door she was knocking on and see where it led. It wasn't an easy choice. Every part of me screamed that I was setting myself up for more heartbreak. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore her. Not forever. Not when every fiber of my being still wanted answers. So I wrote her back. The words came out stiff, cold even, but they were mine. I got your letter. I don't know what you want from me. But if you're serious, tell me where to meet you. I'll think about it. I didn't tell Richard and Claire. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited. And when her reply came a few days later, my hands trembled as I read it. A time. A place. A promise that she'd be there. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. But I knew one thing, the moment I saw her handwriting, my life had shifted. And no matter what happened next, there was no going back. The day I was supposed to meet her, my stomach was in knots from the moment I woke up. I barely ate, barely spoke to anyone. Richard and Claire assumed I was stressed about school, and I let them believe it. I didn't have the energy to explain that my entire past was about to walk back into my life. She'd chosen a small coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. Public, but quiet enough for a conversation. I got there 20 minutes early and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like everyone passing by could hear it. I almost didn't go inside. For a few minutes, I just sat there, watching people walk in and out of the cafe, trying to convince myself to drive away. I thought about the nights I'd cried into my pillow, the years I spent wondering why I wasn't enough, and part of me screamed, she doesn't deserve this chance. But then I thought about that letter. The way her words sounded different this time. The way they didn't feel like excuses, but like someone desperate to be seen, to be forgiven. And before I could talk myself out of it, I opened the car door and walked inside. The smell of coffee hit me first, strong and bitter, mixed with the sweetness of pastries. My eyes scanned the room, and then I saw her. Sitting in the corner, hands wrapped around a paper cup, looking smaller than I remembered. For a second, I froze. She looked older, lines etched into her face, hair pulled back into a messy bun streaked with gray. She wasn't the woman I remembered, not exactly, but there was enough of her in that face to make my chest ache. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Her eyes, those same green eyes I'd inherited, filled with tears. "Ethan," she whispered, like saying my name out loud might break the moment. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I just stood there, my hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, my jaw tight. "Hi," I said flatly. We sat down, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, filled with years of anger, pain, and things we never said. She kept looking at me like she was memorizing every detail, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice shaking. "I know that doesn't fix anything. But I am. I'm so sorry for what I did to you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Sorry? You sold me, Mom. You handed me over like I was nothing. My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. Her face crumpled. I didn't do it because I didn't love you. God, Ethan, you have to believe that. I was in a bad place. Drugs, debt, people threatening me. Stop, I snapped, my hands trembling. Don't make excuses. You had a choice. You could have fought for me. But you didn't. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her sleeve, her shoulders shaking. I know. And I'll never forgive myself for that. But I've been clean for 2 years. I have a job. I'm trying to make things right, even if it's too late. Her words hung there, and for a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to get up and walk out, to leave her sitting there with her guilt and her coffee. But another part, the part that had spent years wondering if she was even alive, wanted to stay. Wanted to understand. I hated you, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. For so long. I told myself I didn't care if you were dead. But I did. I cared every single day. Her hands trembled as she reached across the table, stopping halfway, like she wasn't sure I'd let her touch me. You had every right to hate me, she said softly. But you need to know. I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. Losing you nearly killed me, Ethan. And if you never want to see me again after today, I'll understand. But I had to try. I had to tell you I'm sorry to your face. I stared at her hand hovering there, inches from mine, and felt that familiar war start inside me, anger on one side, the desperate need for connection on the other. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Finally, I pulled my hands out of my pockets and set them on the table, not touching hers, but close enough that she could see I wasn't walking away. Not yet. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. I don't even know if I want to. But I want to understand. I need to understand. She nodded, her tears spilling freely now. That's all I'm asking for. A chance to explain. A chance to be here, if you'll let me. We sat there for hours, talking in broken pieces, stopping and starting, crying and going quiet. It wasn't a miracle fix. It didn't erase the years of pain or the scars she'd left. But it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real. When I walked out of that coffee shop that night, the air felt different. Lighter, somehow. I didn't know what the future would look like, or if we'd ever be okay. But for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry it all alone anymore. I thought I had prepared myself for the truth, but nothing could have braced me for what came out of her mouth that day. My mom sat across from me at the small coffee shop near the bus station, her hands trembling as she tried to hold the mug steady. For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips quivering, eyes glassy with tears she hadn't shed yet. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered, her voice breaking. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to yell, to storm out, to never give her the satisfaction of an explanation. But my body wouldn't move. I sat frozen, every muscle tense, as she continued. We were drowning, she said, looking down. The bills, the eviction notice, your brother's medical expenses. She swallowed hard. I didn't see another way. They offered me money. Enough to keep the house. Enough to buy his medicine. I thought I could fix everything. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My ears rang, my vision blurred. She had sold me. For money. And now she was sitting there acting like she did it for me. Do you know what it was like? I said, my voice low but sharp. Do you know what they did to me in that house? I wasn't your daughter anymore. I was property. She flinched like I had hit her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. My skin burned where her fingers had almost touched. I thought it would just be for a while, she cried. I thought you'd be safe. That you'd be taken care of. I didn't know they. Stop, I cut her off. You didn't want to know. You needed to believe the lies so you could sleep at night. So you could tell yourself you were a good mom doing her best. People around us were staring, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding, my throat aching with all the words I had kept buried for years. She tried to speak again, but I shook my head. You don't get to come back now, I said. You don't get to say you're sorry and expect everything to be okay. You gave me away. And the worst part? I would have rather been poor, hungry, and living in the streets with you than sold like some thing. For a long time, neither of us said anything. She just sat there, broken, her face in her hands. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, the mornings I woke up to the sound of locks clicking shut, the constant fear of never getting out. That pity hardened into anger again, sharp and cold. When I finally stood to leave, her voice followed me. "Please," she said, barely above a whisper. "I just want a chance to make it right." I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I had, I might have seen the same desperation in her eyes that had once been in mine. And I wasn't ready for that, not yet. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window, replaying her words over and over. I thought I could fix everything. Maybe she had. Maybe she truly believed what she was saying. But belief didn't erase the scars. It didn't erase the years I'd lost. The truth hurt more than the silence ever had. Because now I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't tell myself she hadn't known, or that she'd been tricked, or that there had been no choice. She had chosen. And I had been the price. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or fall apart. I just sat there, numb, letting the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of me wanted to believe her, to give her that chance. But the rest of me, the girl who had learned to survive alone, knew better. The past wasn't something you could erase. And forgiveness? That was a language I hadn't learned yet. I stared at my mom, the woman who had brought me into this world, the woman who had traded me away like I was nothing more than a debt to be paid. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, her face marked by years of hardship and guilt. Her eyes, those same green eyes that I used to look for when I was a little kid, were wet with tears as she whispered, "Please, just come home." For a long time, I didn't say a word. My hands trembled at my sides, fists clenching and unclenching, my heart pounding so hard it felt like the entire room could hear it. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, that wanted to believe this was finally my chance to have a mother who cared. But another part of me, the part that remembered every night I cried myself to sleep in that cold house, every slap, every insult, every empty Christmas morning, kept screaming inside my head, "Don't trust her." She reached out her hand, tentative, almost afraid. "I know I don't deserve it," she said, her voice breaking. "But I'm trying to be better. I've been clean for almost 2 years now. I found a steady job. She swallowed hard. I think about you every single day, and I hate myself for what I did." Her words cut deep, but I had learned long ago that words were just words. They didn't erase the scars, physical or emotional. They didn't change the nights I went hungry or the years I spent feeling like I didn't matter to anyone. "I don't know what you want from me," I finally said, my voice shaking. "Forgiveness? A second chance? Because you don't just get to walk back into my life like nothing happened." She flinched, but she didn't back down. "No," she admitted. "I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm asking for one anyway." I didn't trust myself to speak. My foster mom, well, the woman who had taken me in after I escaped that nightmare of a house, stood quietly by the door. She'd been my anchor through so much of the storm. She never pushed me to forgive, never told me what I should do. She just stood by me, letting me figure it out on my own. And right now, her quiet presence was the only thing keeping me grounded. I thought about everything that had led me here. The little kid who used to wait by the window for a mom who never came. The teenager who finally realized that love wasn't supposed to hurt like that. The person I'd become, stronger, tougher, but also guarded, always waiting for the next betrayal. Could I really open that door again? Did I even want to? "I don't hate you," I said finally, my voice softer this time. Her eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected me to say that. "But I don't know if I can let you in." "Not yet." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll wait," she whispered. "For as long as it takes. I just wanted you to know that I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, something real. Regret. Hope. Maybe even love, the kind I had been chasing my entire life. But healing isn't instant. It's not like in the movies where you hug and suddenly everything is fixed. My heart was still heavy with anger, with pain, with years of abandonment that couldn't be erased with a single apology. But for the first time, I didn't feel like that broken little kid anymore. I felt in control. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. "But if I do let you back in, it's going to be on my terms. And it's going to take time." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Anything," she said. "Anything you need." I turned away, walking toward the door, the cool air of the evening hitting my face as I stepped outside. My foster mom followed, silent as always, but I could feel her support in the way she stayed close without saying a word. As we reached the car, I looked up at the sky, fading light turning shades of pink and orange. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. Not her. Not the people who hurt me. Me. And maybe that was enough for now. I didn't know what the future held, if I'd ever truly forgive her, if I'd ever be able to love her the way I had once longed to. But as I sat there in the car, I realized that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant giving myself permission to move forward, to stop letting her choices define me. For the first time, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. And for the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I could build a future where I wasn't just surviving, but living.